Welcome everyone to tonight's council meeting, Monday the 9th of September 2019. If we all stand for the prayer and acknowledgement country, please. Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision making, protect us and the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, culture, tradition and hopes of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. Okay, I need now to inform you that this council meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations. I have one from Mr. Frank Zachnich. Nature of conflicts is pecuniary. Brief description is CEO performance and contract renewal consideration. Ordinary council meeting, items 17.1 and 17.2, and the action is leave the chamber when matter is being considered. That is a confidential item. Thank you, Mr. Zachnich.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This advice to the council meeting relates to the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, section 10.4, requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. The forms are also available at the back of the chamber during meetings. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. Accordingly, the provisions of section 4.151 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, section 375A requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the council. Planning decision means a decision made in the exercise of a function of council under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 9.3 of Part 9 of that Act. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Zachnich. Apologies, there aren't any apologies. We're all here and accounted for. CM5, there is no Merrill minute. CM6, thanks, councillors. Action plans. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the following action plans be received and noted. 1, actions complete for noting only. 2, actions awaiting response from external parties. 3, actions in progress. And 4, long-term issues more than 3 months.
Thank you. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. There being no questions or debate, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Confirmation minutes of the previous meeting. Minutes of council meeting held on Monday the 26th of August 2019. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the following recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held on Monday, 26 August 2019 at 6:55 p.m. be confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey, do you wish to speak to that at all?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. There being no questions or debate, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. We have no reports from community forums. And we have a notice of motion, CM 9.1, request for report AlburyCity projects. Councillor King.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I move that the council resolves to instruct the Chief Executive Officer to provide on reports performed or part performed by AlburyCity Council staff to the value of $250,000 or more to councillors a report prior to the commencement of that project detailing the budgeted cost of the project, the time frame for the completion of the project, budget measured against commercial industry standards, and timeframe measured against commercial industry standards. B, that at the completion of the project performed or part performed by AlburyCity Council to the value of $250,000 or more, provide to councillors a report detailing the final cost of the project and the actual time frame of the project.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor King, I have a question from a councillor and a speaker against. Did you wish to open debate? I'll just take the question first. Councillor Glacken, question?
Thank you. Through you. I am not really certain as to why we would want this report and to what benefit this report would be. I noticed the information provided by the General Manager in so much as some of this information is already provided to us as part of our ongoing information as it comes to council, including part of the annual budget and the reporting against the budget over time. So I'm not really understanding why it is that we would want this as an additional report when a lot of the information is already provided, and to what end we would have this report and this information provided in a subsequent form as opposed to the information that we're already getting in the form that we are. So I'm a little confused as to why we would want this.
So is there a question?
There was no question there. That sounded like debate.
No, I would like to know why we would want this form.
Well, I think that's why we're going to have a debate.
Mr.
I'm happy
Mayor,
to open the question.
my question is to whomever, whether it be Councillor King or the staff, why would we want this information when it's already being provided in different formats?
Councillor King, on that note, I'm thinking we'll open the debate and it may become a bit more clearer. Councillor Glacken, if you wish to ask the question again after the debate is started, then more than happy to take that question on notice. Thank you. Councillor King?
Yes, look, the purpose of this this motion is to get a bit more of a clearer understanding of where the residents and ratepayers' money is being spent in the Works Department. What I'm hoping from this that we get accurate information that details, and I think I've made it pretty clear in the motion, and I only put 6 dot points that we specifically identify the project, we specifically identify the time frame, it's measured against industry standards, and that time frame is measured against commercial industry standards, and then we get a final cost of the project and the actual time it took. Now, I go through reports and I cannot see any of this information that is laid out clearly and concisely that says project, well, let's say Ebden Street road construction was budgeted for, and this is point one, $1.1 million, and it was going to take 3 months. The private industry square metre rate for doing that type of work is 1.05 million. And the industry rate is, the industry time is, 3.5 months. And then I can't find what the actual project actually cost. And that is with all of the additions, any variations, and the actual time it took. So there's only 6 points there. It's not a story, it's not a novel. It just names the project, it gives you a time frame, it gives you an amount, and it gives you a briefing on that project at the end and says that we finished it, and this is how much it cost, and this is how long it took to do. So it's pretty simple. People don't need to read into anything other than what the 6 dot points are, and then we can actually look at and measure how council operates in this field against private contractors. We've had certainly the Deputy CEO come up and when we query what a budget differentiation is, and it might be, hey, this came in $300,000 under, some of the comments are we're getting really good prices for that, that project from private contractors. Is this same thing happen with our own council staff? You know, do we budget $1.2 million and then we do it for $900,000? And if that's the case, this is what this is about, to actually see the numbers and see how we're tracking with it doing efficiently and timely and you know, within the market space.
Thank you, Councillor King. Speaker against, Councillor Thurley.
Yes, I do speak against the motion, Mr Mayor. Not that I am opposed to what the principle of this motion is. However, I feel that I can find almost all of that information in the reports that I receive. Any project comes up with a budgeted cost, it comes up with a time frame, and any report that I've read, I've seen those. The latter two, their budgeted measure against commercial industry standards and time frame, are problematic to me. And we also, in my opinion, get the last two, the final cost of the project and the actual time frame. So I don't believe that there's a urgent need for this project, for this motion. The other problem I see, of course, is that when we ask council staff to write more and more reports, and we did this once with delegations about DAs and so on, and we shot ourselves in the foot. We were getting report after report after report, and they really weren't adding much information, just giving us a lot more data. I had a quick look. If you look at item 14.1 on the agenda tonight, which is the works program status, it talks about 440 projects and $74.6 million. If you just average that out, each one of those projects 170K. So almost all of them will hit this benchmark. We are going to be once again inundated with reports for little useful information, in my opinion. I believe that we've just made a number of changes in our project management in council, right across all departments of council, and I believe we should wait for that, how that works from now on, and see what extra information we get, and then we can fine-tune how we want stuff. But this is, to me, using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I note in some of the information that Councillor King used, he talked about equipment and so on sitting idle. Well, I've driven past AP Delaney's a few times, and their equipment isn't going night and day. You need the equipment there so that you can use it. And council's in a particular position in that we have to respond to emergencies immediately, and we might need to send a crew out to fix a broken sewer main, and we need to have the staff, the equipment, and ready to go.
Where did I say council equipment was laying idle?
In some background information you sent to Councillor Vanderven, and Councillor Vanderven forwarded to other councillors for their information.
I do recall seeing that email, Councillor King. I'm happy to allow the debate to continue. Continue, Councillor Thurley.
So what I'm concerned about basically is I want the same as Councillor King. I want efficiency, I want accountability, and I want our projects to be done at the least cost and in the shortest possible time. But the other thing I want is them to be done well, and basically I'd have to say we do pretty well in that space. Asking for this report on all of these projects, and there'll be quite a lot of them, will simply add another burden to council staff and not do one thing for productivity or efficiency. I think the new structure of project management in this council should be allowed to have a go for a few months, and let's look and see how we're going. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of questions from councillors. I'll take them first. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is directed to Mr Ferris. In relation to the detail that's in the motion before us, I'm interested in what the additional workload on your team will be. If you can answer that one for me, please, in relation to extra hours. Do we need an extra staff member to just do this particular project? Thank you.
Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor. the information, as discussed, is presented in different formats throughout the reports that come to council now. So theoretically, there's not a large amount of extra work required. Our budget costs are based on industry standards, so we review them on a regular basis and review those. Our timeframes are based on industry standards as well. So that information, as outlined in the notice of motion and the comments by the CEO through our quarterly reports, the report you received tonight, which actually lists every project on there, it lists how long we're expecting them to happen. Our budget process, where every project's listed, gives the price that has been budgeted for, so the estimate is already there. From an overall point, increase in workload, it's not significant, except the information is already there.
Happy with that, Councillor
Yes,
Dobson?
thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Glycan, question?
Yes, I have two questions through you, Mr Mayor, to the most relevant member of staff. Councillor King made reference to wanting to confirm, or wanting to be able to justify where people's rates are being spent in the works program. I'd like to ask the staff, I have two questions. The first one is, what is the percentage of council's annual expenditure that is used on the works program? And the second one is, can the staff also provide information to us as to what factors they use to determine what work is tendered out against what work is done by internal staff?
Okay, I think the first one might be Mr Finlayson, the Works Project one. Do you know that information, Mr Finlayson?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I have to take that on notice in terms of an exact percentage.
Okay. Mr Zaknich, did you have a...
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks for the question through you. So in terms of the council's overall budget, in the order of $40 to $45 million is capital works, and a significant portion of that is road maintenance, reconstruction, and upgrades over that period of time. What we've endeavoured to do in terms of the response there is to acknowledge that while that information is already provided for council's information and endorsement at quarterly budget reviews and various times, we could, as a suggestion in the transition to the project management office model, provide a summary report that lists all those things for councillors' consideration. So that's an option for you as we transition to the project management office, as I've detailed in my note to Councillor King's notice of motion.
Thank you. Mr Ferris, the second question.
Yeah, so typically, predominantly most of our capital works is tendered out. On average, it's around 75 to 80% of our work is tendered out anyway. The projects that typically we try and undertake in-house are the ones that historically we don't get a lot of external interest for. They're typically in our build-up streets, similar to recent ones have been the likes of Griffith Street, the full reconstruction there. Historically, when we've put them to the market, they're difficult in nature and therefore we don't get a lot of response to those. And usually the price is higher than we could do it in-house ourselves. So, as I say, the project, as our capital budget, typically there'd be 75 to 80% of that out to contract. A lot of it is specialist type contracts, such as, say, the sewer contract that we let last week for $5 million. Our other major roads like Kerr Road, etc., which are out of the build-up area, they attract some really strong interest and strong competition. But we've found that when you move into Griffith Street, Kiwa Street, those type of projects, we get very limited response from the market because we've still got to provide access to all the properties. There'll be a school there, all those type of things that make them complicated, and they take a long time, and contractors prefer to seek their work elsewhere.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, you happy with that?
Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker 4, Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I appreciate that all of this information is readily available if I have a look through the budget and the quarterly report and this report and that report and the other report, but frankly I think I can see a lot of value in it all being summarised into a single report with really just 6 dot points to report against, such that instead of looking through bulky documents to find the budgeted cost and then looking through another document to find out what it actually did cost. It's all there in front of me. Maybe I'm lazy, I don't know, but I would like to be able to read it all in one summary document. For example, the 3 projects that I can think of that were undertaken by staff since I've been here: Griffith Street, Kiewa Street and Yambler Place. I don't recall what the budgets were for those jobs in the budget, and I don't recall ever reading anything that said whether they ran on time or to budget or not, because it was buried in some report somewhere. I'm sure the work was all done satisfactorily and to budget and to time, but I just don't know. And this report might give me that information in a more easily digestible form. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Speaker against, Councillor Vandervan.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of issues here that I did, as Councillor Thurley mentioned, forward the rationale for this particular motion that was sent to myself and Councillor Mack and Councillor Stutchbury, but not to other councillors. And I thought we had a bit of a protocol around sending the same information to all councillors. So I took that opportunity the other day when this came up on the agenda. I'm quite surprised, though, that with the CEO's note, especially the identified additional future initiatives to align with this request, that on the basis of what Councillor King has put as a motion, I would have thought that the identified additional future initiatives would more than cover the issues that Councillor King has. And on that basis, I'm surprised that he still moved it. And if this motion doesn't get up, I'll move an alternative motion that we actually put those 2 identified additional future initiatives as a motion to actually get that done. Should once we get the project management office fully functional. So I agree with the comments that we have all this information. There's only a few bits of information that we require extra, which has been identified by the CEO, and from that basis, I think that this motion is a waste of time, and we should just be satisfied with the CEO's note and do that as a little bit of extra work to provide the reports in as Councillor Stutchbury wants in one space. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. There are no speakers for, but I have 2 speakers against. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I speak against this. I too, like Councillor Vandervan, am a little surprised that this motion has continued, noting that most of the information is provided to us already, and that the General Manager has reminded us of the fact that a new program or an initiation has yet to be fully bedded in within council, and that in the interim we can provide subsequent information to the councillors as a stopgap measure. The reality is that we're talking about one part of what council does, the works program, and a small proportion of that, the 20 to 25% of that works program, and Councillor King wanting to justify where the ratepayers' money is being spent within that portion of a portion. I can't understand why we would target just that one area, and why we would want to know that portion of a portion as against to the whole portion of the council works program. I am a little confused still as to why Councillor King would like the staff to be able to provide that in that information again to him, but in the format that he requires. And perhaps it would be better if we ask the staff to show us, all of us, including Councillor King, where that information is provided. So perhaps a workshop for all councillors. Most of us are able to find that information already, but perhaps a workshop that we could all attend and all be provided with the same input as to where that information is made available to us already. That might be more useful. It appears to me that we're tweaking around the edges because we're looking at a portion of a portion, ends up being 20 to 25% of a works program. And so I cannot understand why this is continuing. I do agree with Councillor Van der Ven and hope that we have an opportunity to put the measure in that the the CEO has suggested would be an interim measure until the full program for the project management within council would be brought in, because at the moment tweaking around the edges does not help us as councillors, and it certainly does not help our community, the people who are indeed paying the rates for what would be additional reports and information to be made available to councillors that is already there if we only look at it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gleck. And no speakers for, speaker against. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, to me, we're having a debate about the format of reports. I think what Councillor King is seeking and what we would all agree with is that we want to make sure that our own services are as efficient as possible. If this information was readily available already, we wouldn't be having this debate and the motion wouldn't have been moved. The work status report, like the one in tonight's agenda, does include pages and pages and pages of Gantt charts, which are not easily digestible. And I'm not going to patronise fellow councillors for finding that difficult to digest. Look, I think this information obviously does need to be made more accessible and more available. I don't support the motion in its current format because staff estimated that the number of projects captured by this notice of motion in the past year would have been 50 to 70. With a report prior to commencement and following completion, that's between 100 and 140 additional reports a year. I don't want to ask the staff to write those, and I don't think I would read all of those either. I think that it sounds like we need additional information in our quarterly reports, whether that's in the budget reports, the operational plan updates, and the suggestions in the CEO's note might be the way forward. So I'll be voting against the motion, though I support its intent, and I suppose look forward to the debate on alternative motions of how we can get this information in a more accessible way.
Thank you, Councillor Con. There appears to be no further speakers for or against. Whilst I'll use this opportunity to say that it's interesting that the CEO's note has reflected upon a lot of the debate in the chamber tonight, and if nothing else, Councillor King's motion has enabled that process to occur. I don't purport to tell any council what motions they can or can't bring to the chamber, because that's their democratic right. And in this case, I think the motion has relevance, but if you do read into the CEO's notes, there is an option which Councillor Van der Ven has indicated he's happy to propose if the motion is lost. So I think, if nothing else, there has been achievement by the tabling of the motion. So, Councillor King, did you wish to close debate? Thanks.
Yes, I just want to say that that's my aim. Certainly, Councillor Stutchbury reflected what I was hoping to get across. That there's 6 dot points. You know, there's figures. There's a date. I don't think the hysteria of other councillors, you know, putting extreme workload onto council staff is warranted. I certainly think that if, you know, busy councillors can see this type of information in a concise manner, and you know, good on the CEO for actually putting those other things together, and hopefully I brought that forward so we can get accurate, timely, concise information on how the council is operating on across all platforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. I'm Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is lost. Councillor Vanderman, did you wish to propose an alternate motion?
Quite simply that council implement the identified additional future initiatives to align with this request and those 2 bullet points.
Okay, all right, we'll just get them up on the board for you.
Yeah, I think that's it gives us the idea, Mr. Mayor.
Motion, but is there a doing word in front of that directing?
That we implement the identified additional future initiatives as follows.
Okay.
It's finished. Bugger. It was nice too.
Yeah. Okay. You comfortable with that one, Councillor Vanderman?
Thank you.
Councillor Glacken?
Happy to second Councillor Vanderman's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, did you wish to open debate?
Briefly, Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor King has indicated already that that he would support something like this because this is what he was trying to achieve. The only other note I make is, just with the budget measured against commercial industry standards, which was now, if you like, been knocked out, but it's also in our normal tendering process or our budget process. It's the industry standards vary depending on what the workload is of the commercial providers of these services. So I've in my 16 or 15 years on council, I've noticed that some occasions where quotes from industry are competitive, really competitive, and really competitive rates, and then there are other times when they're fully committed that those rates tend to climb. So from that perspective, it's problematical to try and get a commercial industry standard to measure against, but understanding that, I think that the information we're now asking council staff to implement will provide the information that Councillor King and other councillors have indicated would be useful. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Councillor Con, did you wish to speak for the motion?
Just briefly, Mr Mayor, look, in addition to the points I made previously and the points just made by Councillor Vanderven, that I think receiving this information as a quarterly summary actually makes it much easier for us to have a look at patterns and any actionable items that arise out of that summary, and is probably more valuable to us than getting each project as a separate report. So happy to support this one.
Thank you. No further questions or debate. Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to speak to close the debate?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. CM11, reports of minutes, committees and working parties. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move, and I better find it, no, it's up there, that the minutes and recommendations of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee meeting held on Wednesday the 14th of August 2019, including the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee Annual Report 2018-19 be received, noted and accepted.
Thank you. Councillor Gluckin.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, just open debate on that.
Just to note and bring to other councillors' attention that the charter of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee committee is being reviewed right now, and we will also begin recruiting soon to replace 2 members of the existing committee who have resigned. Apart from that, it's a fairly routine matter.
Thank you. Leonard, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. There are no documents for sealing, and we're up to officers' reports for consideration. 13.1, the council elections 2020. Thank you. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation that Council A, pursuant to Section 296(2) and 3 of the Local Government Act 1993, that an election arrangement be entered into by contract for the Electoral Commissioner to administer all elections of the Council. B, pursuant to Section 296(2) and 3 of the Act, as applied and modified by Section 18, that a council poll arrangement be entered into by contract for the Electoral Commissioner to administer all council polls of the Council. And C, pursuant to Section 296(2) and 3 of the Act, as applied and modified by Section 18, that a constitutional referendum arrangement be entered into by contract for the Electoral Commissioner to administer all constitutional referenda of the Council.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Con, have you, I overspeak a question. Happy for me to take the question?
Sure.
Thank you. 2 questions. Councillor Vanderman, first question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through you to relevant staff member. Under item 6, 2016 election cost estimates, it was indicated that the Electoral Commission had an estimated cost of $236,344 and the eventual cost was $260,000. Could we get an indication of why the variation from the estimated cost, and was the estimated cost a quote, or was just that it was an estimated cost? The other issue for me is that we have a wide-ranging cost estimate for the 2020 election of between $298,000, which is the New South Wales Electoral Commission proposed, and the $388,000 IPART recommended. Now, I note that I did mention this in the meeting that we had with Councillor Scott, the President of the Local Government Association in New South Wales, who is fully on board. But is there anything else we can do to make sure that our cost doesn't increase above the $298,000?
Mr Zachnich.
Thanks for the question, through you, Councillor Vanderman. We'll come back to you on the variations in the 2016. Was an estimate from the Electoral Commission compared to the final budget. For the reasons behind that, I'll get those details to you, to circulate those. In terms of the range that's detailed in the report for the 2020 elections, the indications from the New South Wales Electoral Commissions are the ones that we're focusing on at this stage. IPART's estimates were based on their report back to the New South Wales Government as to how the system, they're recommending the system should operate to engender more competition in the sector, bearing in mind there's only one other potential provider now that councils have been excluded from running their own elections under the legislation, and that other provider has a very small component of the current market, and without any significant investment in systems and technology, that'll probably continue. So we don't have a lot of choice other than to accept the recommendation that's been proposed, and then have obviously some more detailed negotiations with the Electoral Commission based on their estimate to make sure that that aligns more closely with what the final outcome will be, in addition to the opportunity that we enabled last time to share a returning officer between one or more adjoining councils at the last election, which is the other potential saving between, I think, $25,000 and $30,000 in the report that's detailed.
Just to follow up, Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Yep.
A couple of issues. Thank you for the detailed response to my question. Notwithstanding the fact that we shared the electoral officer with other councils, we still finished up with about a $30,000 difference between what we got charged and what we got proposed to be charged. And the other issue for me is there any hint of anti-competitive behaviour by the government through this electoral commission in what they're trying to do?
Mr. Zachnich?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you for the question. I think the government's endeavoured to throw some light on the whole competitive process for running elections, but as you've seen in terms of the estimates, that will be the cost potentially may increase further as a result of that if it's open to competition. So I suppose they're having a bit each way in respect to that particular suggestion in terms of being, competitive in a what seems to be at least this stage in a single operator environment, and that would apply to other jurisdictions as well, as as we understand.
Just one other follow-up, Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Yes.
In the CEO's estimation, would if we went to a more suitable method of voting at local government election, which would be like a first past the post, said the stupid preferential system that we seem to be saddled with, would there be any cost savings to councils if there was a simpler voting method?
Yes, thanks for the question through you, Mr. Mayor. Potentially, yes, and this council in previous submissions has also suggested other models, including consideration of postal voting, a whole range of other options that might reduce the cost. The flip side of that, of course, is the democratic process and participation, and the ideal around the community's ability to vote in a certain environment or dynamic in a community. They're the other components that council's also balanced its submission to the state government on.
So just a final question, Mr. Mayor. Look, I know that I said that before, but now this is definitely final on this issue. So yes or no, Mr. Zachnich, the IPART and the government have basically ignored any suggestions about cost saving and different voting methods in our submission. So they basically ignored what majority of councils in this state want to happen.
Mr. Zachnich?
I won't say they've ignored it through Mr. Mayor. I think they've considered it and then continued to do what it is they've been doing.
Thank you for putting that in the same words as what I asked the question as. Thank you.
That's the third question.
Fairly simple question. Is the duration of pre-polling determined by Electoral Commission or by us?
Mr. Zachnich?
By submissions to the government and then implementation by the Electoral Commission. So in submissions by council previously, we've asked the question around the 2-week timeframe for pre-polling, whether that could be shortened based on submissions from this council and other councils, but that's been rejected. So it's still 2 weeks.
Okay. Councillor Con, did you wish to open debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, bringing us back to the decision that's actually at hand, it's whether we want to contract the New South Wales Electoral Commission or whether we want to go with a third-party private provider. I think some very important and valuable questions have been asked tonight, but they're not relevant to the decision we're actually making. I certainly wouldn't trust a for-profit third-party private body with the integrity of our elections. I don't think the community would, and certainly the majority of councils don't either. It's obvious to me that we should be entrusting our democracy to the New South Wales Electoral Commission and supporting the recommendation, notwithstanding if there are measures to save costs such as sharing the returning officer with neighbouring councils. Obviously happy to support those, but I think this is a very straightforward decision tonight. Last thing to note as well was that those councils that did employ private providers had significant issues with accessibility for people with disabilities, so those are the kinds of costs that were cut.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, you have a question?
Thank you. Would the mover and seconder consider item D that we continue to advocate for cheaper local government elections?
Councillor Con.
I see no issue with that.
Councillor Thurley?
I have no problem. We should always be pushing them to cut their costs.
So it's to continue to advocate for cheaper
Local
government election costs for local government elections. Okay. Councillor Con, there's no further debate or questions. Do you wish to close debate?
No, thanks.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried. We have the review of the local government rating system, 13.2. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A receive and note the review of the local government rating system final report prepared by the Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal, and B, endorse AlburyCity's draft submission to the New South Wales Government regarding the Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal's review of the local government rating system final report.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, open debate.
I've probably said on numerous occasions in this chamber about the IPART review of the rating system. December 2015, IPART made their report, and finally in June 2019, the government releases the report. And basically they say, we're not changing anything. We're not listening to any of your submissions. We advocated strongly that rating on land be related to its use, not its ownership. They said no. So you can own land because you're protected under some scheme, like you're an education department or a religious enterprise. Doesn't matter what you're using the land for, you can still claim the rate exemption. Utterly ludicrous. It's simply shifting costs onto councils all the time, and we get nowhere with any submission we make to IPART or to this government.
Thank you. No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM 13.3, the Ivor Memorial Community Trust Financial Assistance Request. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council approve the following financial assistance to the Ivor Memorial Community Trust. A $330,000 10-year interest-free loan to facilitate the acquisition of the Bristol Court hangar with a specific loan agreement to be developed subject to achievement of deductible gift recipient status. B, an increase of $5,778 in 2019-20 financial assistance to cover pro rata lease fees for Bristol Court hangar. And C, an ongoing increase in financial assistance in 2020-21 from the current $10,000 to $23,000 to cover the increased lease costs associated with the Bristol Court hangar, subject to the development of triennial financial assistance service agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Very happy to second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I have a question. Councillor Thurley, happy for me to
Yep.
take the question.
Thank-
Councillor Glacken, question.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, to the most relevant member of staff. Page 58 of the report. The second paragraph says, in previous years, UMCT has attracted approximately $100,000 per year through donations, etc. Can the staff provide us with information, generic information on approximately how much they've raised? So is it, I think it's 5 or 6 years, 6 years of $100,000, and how are they achieving this level of fundraising? It's absolutely amazing. And is it likely that this will continue? Is it the same batch of people who are giving the same donation each year, therefore it's likely to continue, etc.? I'm just trying to see how this figures in the medium to longer term. Thank you.
Ms Squire.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thanks for the question, Councillor Glacken. I can confirm in 16-17 the organisation received $105,913 in donations, not in kind but cash, excluding any financial assistance from AlburyCity. In 17-18 it was $96,520, and in 18-19 it was actually only $8,000 for that last financial year. But prior to that, they were averaging around $100,000 per year. In terms of the makeup of the donations and the likelihood of them continuing, I can't speak to that, Councillor Glacken, but I'm happy to follow up with UMCT and seek further information in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Squire. Over Speaker 4, Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I think this is... Yeah,
oh, did you
sure.
open? Oh, Councillor Thurley. Sorry, mate.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to move this motion with those small change in the first dot point A. We are moving ahead with this project, and the lease of the Bristol Court hangar is essential for the project. The amount of restoration that's been carried out so far is amazing, but not much more can be done unless we get it into a much bigger space. So I'm quite happy with that. And then the longer term is a loan so that the Bristol Court hangar can be purchased. And I don't have any problem with this, except of course it is a large amount of money, and we require from other community groups certain standards, and this is the only reason I ask that this group achieved DGR status. I understand that's well underway. I had little concern because it's been underway for a while, but I hope to see that forthcoming soon, and this grant will be paid immediately thereafter if this motion is successful.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Vanderman, I have a question from Councillor Glacken. Councillor Glacken.
Sorry, thank you, Mr Mayor, and I must apologise, I forgot I had two questions. My other question was with regards to the purchase, so the acquisition of the Bristol Court hangar. In the interim, there's been a lease arrangement. Ultimately, the aim is to purchase that. Would the hangar then become the property of council, or would that be the property of the trust? And on what basis would that then ultimately, very much longer term, be resolved?
Ms Squire.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thanks for the question, Councillor Glacken. The lease is proposed to be assigned to the UMCT from the current lessee. AlburyCity owns the land and will continue to own the land. The lease provides for the lessee to have control and ownership of the buildings on the land and responsibility for their maintenance and management. And sorry, Councillor Glacken, can you just reiterate the second part of your question around when it would be resolved?
Sure. My understanding is that ultimately it is, this place is a medium-term location, and ultimately we're looking at a longer-term location for the DC2. If and when that longer-term opportunity were to be realised, what would then happen to the Bristol Court hangar? Would that then revert to... Thank you.
Ms Squire.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thanks for the clarification, Councillor Glacken. Given that UMCT would be the lessee, they would then, if they no longer had a business requirement for the Bristol Court hangar, they could potentially assign that lease for a consideration, so effectively sell the lease to another party, and that may potentially provide an injection of capital to support, future development of a permanent home for the IVA replica if this is not ultimately going to be that home.
No problem. Councillor Vanderman, you want to speak for?
Thank you. I just want to say here to Councillor Thurley's opening remarks.
Thank you. There are no further speakers for or against. I'd just like to say that in this previous term of council and this term of council, the UMCT have had some interesting milestones, and for a very small but determined group to get to this point in time, and I know Peter Moll's in the chamber tonight, to get to this point in time has been in itself a significant achievement, and I only hope that the further milestones are reached, and this particular loan and purchase of this hangar, which I think is quite very reasonable and done at great at a great negotiation by the UMCT with council, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the guys to get the job done, and certainly I wish you all the best. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to close debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Audit Risk and Improvement Committee Charter Review, 13.4. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A adopt the draft Audit Risk and Improvement Committee Charter as attached, and B, in accordance with the adopted Audit Risk and Improvement Committee Charter, commence the process to fill the vacant external independent positions.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to open debate on that item?
I just note that the review of the charter is a routine matter that occurs from time to time, and on this occasion it will be coupled with filling 2 external audit positions. But apart from that, fairly routine matter.
Thank you. No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM 13.5, application for a local public holiday, Albury Gold Cup. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council consider whether to support the half-day public holiday for the 2020 and 2021 Albury Gold Cup at its meeting on the 28th of October 2019, taking into account the results of consultation with key stakeholders, including the general community.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Con, do you wish to open debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, my deviation from the recommendation for this one is one of process. Transparency and accountability have been priorities of this term of council. We need to go through a consultation process to be able to put in an application for a half-day public holiday. There is an intention to do that. We really can't make a decision before that consultation is done. It's not a box-ticking exercise. We need to actually listen to the community when we do consultation. I understand that the deadline for the application is the 8th of November, and the estimate time frame for consultation was 2 weeks, so we should have more than enough time to undertake the consultation as planned in the attachment to the report, and then reconsider this item on the 28th of October.
Thank you, Councillor Con. Councillor Vanderman, you wish to speak for?
Just briefly, Mr Mayor, I understand that this is a variation to the recommendation that was initially proposed in the motion, and I have no issue with going out to the general community for this, but to understand in the context of this particular the normalcy, if you like, of granting the half-day holiday, initially, probably when I first got on council, and Councillor Glacken will remember that there was some moves to reject the half-day holiday by councillors, and then it turned out that the race club went to the minister directly and got the half-day holiday granted. So it was then a situation for me where we could make the whole event something that really set Albury aside from everybody else in the racing community, and it looked to be a situation where, if we supported it, we could do something with it, and that's happened in the past. So I just issued that note of caution. Whilst I supported the motion and seconded the motion as it stands, I just make that note that it is a good event and it has a history, and there's also some history about council refusing to grant that half-day holiday. So I just issue that note of caution in this forum. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervan. Speaker against, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Councillor Vandervan has indicated, there is some history around this issue, and I was on council in '95 when we resolved to first grant the half-day holiday. And I can tell you, Mr. Mayor, and the other councillors here, that it was a very hard-fought campaign. The traditional position of the council had been that they would not support it. The business community in Albury, led by the Chambers of Commerce at that time, vehemently opposed it and threatened that businesses would be ruined if we were to grant this half-day holiday. And there was a strong reaction from many of the councillors on council not to grant the half-day holiday. In the end, it got up with the support of Gary Purtell and Frank Millen, who were councillors at that time, and well done to them. In the intervening years, and it's a source of some amusement, as I've remarked in my last term of council, to see the way that the Chamber of Commerce and the business community now endorses and accepts the good that the Albury Gold Cup does the local economy of Albury, and the people that it does bring, and visitors and tourism and business that it does bring to our city. I find that quite amusing and ironic. Nevertheless, I don't think that there's any requirement, from a procedural point of view, to make the change that Councillor Cohen is proposing, and I would be quite happy to support the amendment the motion as the recommendation as was originally published. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. There are no speakers for. I have another speaker against, Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I propose that if this motion is lost, that I would happily put up the original recommendation from the staff. As a councillor who does remember the situation Councillor Vandervan has referred to, I was also a business owner here in Albury, and it is difficult for, especially small business owners, to be able to support the half-day public holiday because it can directly affect their business. But overall, the overwhelming positive financial benefit to our community is immense, because it is not just people going and buying a frock and a hat, as I do every time I go to the Albury Gold Cup. It is the positive benefit of the knock-on effect of all of those purchases, all of those people coming to town, all of those restaurants who assist, all the caterers, all the food providers who sell to the caterers. The accommodation is booked out, transport to and from. It is an amazing spin-off. And I will openly admit that I had not anticipated the total effect that this Gold Cup would have financially on our community. The other very important factor is that we as a council and a community have been saying for many, many years, we need something that is our event. Well, this is, at the moment, our event. This is Albury's flagship event. We've got a couple every year. One is the Carols by Candlelight, and one is the Albury Gold Cup. It's there, it's functioning, it's been successful, the runs are on the board. There's a partnership with the New South Wales Government, there's a partnership with the Chambers of Commerce and the retailers within our community. To not support this half-day public holiday now would be to the detriment of our community, because it would decrease the financial benefit, and it would mean that, again, we would be lacking one of those fantastic opportunities to have an event that is Albury and celebrates Albury. So I can't support this recommendation before us. The information has been made available to us previously. There is nothing really that has changed other than the event has been more successful than had been originally anticipated when it was first agreed to allow the half-day holiday, and it would be detrimental to our retail community and the associated economic benefits attached to that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glack. I have a question. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through you to the relevant member of staff. Is there any point in adding perhaps a proviso that, we've got to frame this properly, that we have a 2-day carnival rather than a 1-day carnival as has been in the last year? I think it's proposed to be a 2-day carnival next year, like a Thursday, Friday, and the public holiday on the Friday. Is there any point in doing that? Is that going to make any difference eventually to the process, or do we just leave it as whatever they want to do, basically?
Squire.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thanks Councillor Vandervan for the question. I think there's never been a request from the Albury Race Club, and I'm not sure if I've misinterpreted your question, but to seek to have any sort of half-day public holiday declared for a 2-day event. But if, in terms of us specifying whether it's a 1-day carnival or a 2-day carnival, the intention, as I understand it, is to continue with the 2-day carnival model, but that is significantly influenced by what other racing events might be happening in a particular calendar year, in order to make sure that, I guess, the race club can develop the best possible model. I don't think that it has any impact on council's considerations with regard to the half-day public holiday, because it is, I guess, it has been an ongoing approach by the race club to try and maximise the benefit of the program.
Okay, there are no further speakers for or against. Councillor Condon, do you wish to close debate on your motion?
Yes, thank you. And just to remind councillors that this motion wasn't inviting a substantive debate on the Albury Gold Cup. The motion as it stands isn't detrimental to anyone. The due date for the application for the half-day public holiday is the 8th of November. And if support is as strong as my fellow councillors suggest from the community, then that will be evident then. What the speakers against are really proposing is that we undertake a stakeholder engagement process as planned and documented in the attachments, with no opportunity to then consider the results. If we're going to bother consulting our community, then we really have to listen to those results and take them on board. And that's all that this motion is suggesting, is that we make the decision after the consultation, not before the consultation, and then ignore it.
Thank you, Councillor Con. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is lost. Councillor Glacken, I think, was proposing the original motion.
Thank you. And the wording, I'll just find that.
That council support the half-day public holiday for the 2020 and 2021 Albury Gold Cup.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. That council support the half-day public holiday for the 2020 and 2021 Albury Gold Cup.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to that?
Mr Mayor, I think it's an important part of our social calendar here in Albury. It provides a wonderful opportunity for us to showcase our community and what our community has to offer. It enables and encourages our local community to participate as well. The economic benefit of the Albury Gold Cup is considerable, and we need to support this. I only wish that we could, providing the half-day holiday, I only wish we were able to insist that everyone who took the half-day holiday was actually mandated to go to the race instead of taking the half-day holiday and not participating. However, I do acknowledge that those who don't necessarily attend the race meeting do often go into the town and also add to that economic benefit. So thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Con, you wish to speak against the motion?
Yeah, unfortunately obliged to vote against this motion on the grounds that we're voting to undertake stakeholder engagement, the results of which will be notified to us via email, and we're making that decision before we actually undertake the engagement, and I think that's wrong.
Thank you. Speaker 4, Councillor Cameron.
This has been supported by council and this community strongly for many years now, and the only people that I could imagine who would not be in favour of it would be the same sort of dropkicks who picketed the premiere of the new film about the young lady who won the Melbourne Cup the other year down in Melbourne recently. Extremist animal activists, and who are fortunately still a very small minority in our community. But apart from those sort of flips, I don't know anyone in our community who doesn't support the Albury Gold Cup and wouldn't support the Albury Gold Cup half holiday.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Question just before I take a speaker against. Ms Squire, in relation to the final paragraph, it is intended to update council on the results of the community and stakeholder engagement once they've been finalised. Can you please explain, why is this an interim lodgement, and if we get a negative response from that return, do we also include that? Can you please explain to me why it is back to front?
Through you, Mr Mayor, or to you, in the last 3 times we've undertaken community consultation in relation to the Albury Gold Cup public holiday, the results have been pretty much the same. And the thought was, unless there was a marked difference in feedback from the community, then, you know, ultimately the current support that exists we anticipated would continue. If that was markedly different, that would be emailed to councillors, and even at that point, councillors could at any time call up a report, should they wish to receive one, with that detailed information prior to the lodgement date. So that was the intention behind the recommendation as written, was simply because the results have been so consistent in the recent years that we've done the consultation.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, speaker against.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I start with a question, please?
Yes, you can.
In paragraph on page 69, under community consultation in 2017, the department. Can I ask who that department is? Is it the Department of Racing, or which department is it?
Ms Squire.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, I believe it is, just to be not that I'm 100% sure, but I believe it is the Department of Racing and Gaming.
Okay. So I think our councillors should be aware of this particular...
Just stand by, Councillor Vanderman. Mr Zachnich.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, through Councillor Vanderman. It's actually the Department of Industrial Relations, because they are public holiday declarations, which affects work hours, etc.
Okay. So
thank you. Right.
On the basis that it is a department that is noted in this particular paragraph, and I read verbatim, in 2017, the department updated their guidelines and requirements. These guidelines require AlburyCity to undertake a public consultation process to support a biennial application for a half-day holiday with specific information needed, in particular, etc., etc., etc. Now, you well know that I don't often agree with Councillor Con on many issues, but in this particular instance, I have no choice but to support 100% the comments that Councillor Con has made, that we are making a decision before we accept or receive the results of that public consultation. And I ask councillors to put this motion aside, and if this motion is lost, I will move the original motion as put with a slight amendment to make sure that we're not double dipping. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Vandervan, very entertaining. Okay, there's no further speakers for or against. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to close debate?
Mr Mayor, I think we've debated this considerably this evening, and I would be grateful if you would put this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. I'm putting the motion. Those for? Those against? Okay, then that motion is lost. Councillor Vanderman.
I move that Council consider whether to support the half-day public holiday for the 2020-21 Albury Gold Cup at its meeting on the 28th of October 2019, taking into account the results of consultation with key stakeholders, including the general community and the business community.
So we added the business community. Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll just wait for that to magically appear. She hasn't yet. There it is. Okay, Councillor Con.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I should take the opportunity to second this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan, can you open debate, please?
No, Mr Mayor,
No.
I'll reserve my right of reply.
Thank you. Speaker against, Councillor Cameron.
Now, I know what's going on here, Mr Mayor. I know what's going on. I didn't come down the last shower. The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Con, has a publicly stated matter of record position that she is opposed to horse racing. And it seems to me that some councillors in this chamber have been lured into a situation now. Well, I don't know what that interjection was about, but
Anyway.
just to reiterate, Councillor Con.
Yes, Councillor Con.
Mr Mayor, I find it disrespectful, the allegation that I've been luring anyone.
Yes,
in this chamber.
Councillor Cameron, could you just rephrase that, please?
A situation has been deliberately or inadvertently created in which some councillors who should know better, in my view, have supported a situation where we'll now open the process up for disaffected minority groups to grandstand on this issue. As I said in the previous debate, this is an issue which has been consistently and overwhelmingly supported by our community. It is an event which brings a huge amount of good to Albury, and be careful of opening up the Pandora's box of giving oxygen to extremist groups of Fruit Loops. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Speaker for Councillor Con.
I have consistently and on the record supported transparency, accountability and consultation in this term of council, and that's why I'm supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Con. Councillor Con, is it true that you are opposed to horse racing?
Councillor Con, did you wish to answer that question?
I don't think it's relevant to the motion that's been put. We'll be considering it on the 28th of October.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Cameron? You're done.
Certainly. Councillor Con, do you intend to participate on the debate on the 28th if this motion is carried?
Yes, I don't see why I wouldn't.
And is it not a matter of record that you have publicly stated your opposition to the horse racing industry?
I can't recall what's on the record. I will participate in debate, taking into account the results of the consultation that we're about to undertake.
Well, let's hope that this isn't derailed by prejudices of some small groups in our community.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Vandervan, did you wish to close debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to rebut some of Councillor Cameron's comments, that nobody's been lured into anything. On the issue here.
Point of order. Thank you,
I withdrew
Councillor
that
Cameron.
statement.
He withdrew the statement. Thank
Well,
you, Councillor.
I'll withdraw mine then. The issue for me is that Ms Squire clearly said that on the 3 previous times that the consultation has been undertaken, there's been consistent results in favour of the public holiday. I do not expect this consultation to show any different, but we need to go through that consultation process if the department that is mentioned in the report has any legal founding whatsoever. We need to go through the process of that consultation before we make the decision, and that's what this motion is about. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervan. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. CM 13.6, the water meter reading services contract number 19/039110. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that council accept the tender from Skill Tech Consulting Services Proprietary Limited for the schedule of rates contract number 19/039110, water meter reading services for a 4-year period with an estimated contract value of $680,200, including GST.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to open debate?
No, I think it's a fairly routine matter. The report was quite clear and we're well served by the company involved.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor Cameron. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through you to the most appropriate member of staff. My question is, can staff assure councillors that Skill Tech fulfil all of their legal responsibilities in terms of employment law?
Mr Ferris.
And what evidence, if any, is there of that, other than the stat tech?
Mr Ferris. We've got Mr Wallow here to answer the question under the guise of a guest.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr Mayor. Council has worked with the recommended contractor since 2001, and over that period we have not witnessed any contractual issues. In addition to that, the referee checks carried out on the preferred contractor all gave them very good recommendations, so we do not foresee that there will be any issues within this.
Can you provide any information to council on whether Skill Tech directly employ their meter readers, or whether they employ them on ABNs or individual contracts or as subcontractors?
Mr Wallow.
I can confirm that they're not subcontractors. I would have to take on notice your other questions, Councillor Cameron.
Okay, thanks, Mr Wallow. Councillor Vandervan, question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, just a quick one. Over the years, I've made continuous requests as to where we're going with smart water meter reading, on the basis that I believe that it would make the process of meter reading much streamlined and efficient and save money for council. I just wonder where that is at, considering that we've got a lot of new development out of Thaguna that would be ideal for testing these particular technologies.
Mr Wallow.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the question. It's generally understood that smart metering provides an increased level of service to our residents. The savings that may be gleaned from the meter reading, or the need not to read the meters, is taken up in operating the systems and the communication system between the water meters and a base station.
So on that basis, understanding that there might not be a saving to council on the basis that we provide a better service to our community, would that still not be worth doing?
Mr Warlow.
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's certainly something that council officers have had a look at. The Smart Cities Coordinator, that unfortunately is a role that's not filled at present at council, was looking into the smart metering along with other council officers from the water and wastewater group. We do anticipate that we will pursue this technology at a time when we are comfortable that we can get a good result for our community.
Just a quick follow-up. Can we put a timeline on that rather than when we're comfortable with different things? Can we put a timeline for a report to council about the future of smart water meter reading?
Mr Sacknich.
We certainly can, thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Can I suggest we provide you a report in the lead up to the coming budget process, just to compare what the options might be for council's consideration?
Thank you. Councillor Stubbs, we have a question.
Yes, a question through you, Mr Mayor, to the most relevant member of staff. I did note in the report that this company successfully tendering will be reading the urban water meters, whilst the rural water meters in AlburyCity are going to be continuing to be read by council staff. I'm just interested to understand why all water meters are not read by the proposed tenderer, and is there a budget for the council staff to read the 1,500 rural meters, and how does that compare with costs from the tenderer?
Mr Warlow.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Traditionally, due to the long meter reading routes out in the rural areas, it has been deemed by council officers that it is more cost effective to undertake utilising council staff. I would have to take on notice the exact dollar value for council staff undertaking those rural meter reads and provide that back at a later date.
Thank you, Mr Warlow. Councillor Stubbs, are you comfortable with that? Yep. Okay. Thanks, Mr Warlow. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to close debate on that
No,
item?
thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the item on. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.7, the development application 10.2019.368889.1572 Keywar Street, Albury. Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, the recommendation, to move the recommendation as a motion, that Council A, receive and note the contents of this report. B, agree to enter into a planning agreement for the payment of monetary contributions in lieu of 12 car parking spaces as outlined in the draft planning agreement between Albury City Council and Bethany Developments Proprietary Limited. C, hereby authorises its seal to be affixed to the planning agreement as part of the determination of the development application 10.2019.36889.1 in the presence of two signatories authorised to affix the seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the Council seal and management of legal documents and advice procedure. And D, grant development consent to development application 10.2019.36889.1 for office development and associated planning agreement at 572 Keywar Street, Albury, subject to conditions contained in the draft determination included at attachment 4.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Glacken, did you wish to open debate? Have you got your breath back?
Yes, just to make a couple of points. I personally am never really entirely comfortable with seeing the demise of any red brick property in Albury, let alone in central Albury. I think they are a signature within our city, and so it's a little difficult for me to move this recommendation as a motion. However, I do note a couple of things, a couple of aspects about this proposed development, and that is that in the report it says in the middle of page 79 that there have been to date no submissions received with reference to this application. I note also that the proponent is planning to develop something that is aligned with, not a replica of, but somewhat aligned to the property to the direct north along Keywar Street of this proposed site. I also note, and it is indeed in the recommendation, that they are proposing that 12 car parking spaces be paid for, which is part of the program that AlburyCity offers as an opportunity for would-be developers to be able to utilise city parking opportunities. Almost directly behind that property is indeed a parking facility owned by council, developed by council, and it has been for some time known that that property would be able to, the parking development would be able to be enhanced at a future date as required. So it means then that it is sensible that the developer utilise that opportunity that council facilitates of many developers within our city. And I encourage councillors to, whilst I do acknowledge again, it does pain me to see a red brick house in Albury be demolished, I encourage councillors to support this application.
Councillor Glacken. There appears to be no speakers for or against at this point.
Mr Mayor, look on the board there, you'll see Councillor Con was the mover.
Oh, Councillor Con. No, she wasn't. It was Councillor Glacken. Thank you for picking that up, Councillor Doxey.
My pleasure, Mr Mayor.
Speaking on behalf of Councillor Con,
I know. Well, we'll just have to do that without him. Okay, thank you, councillors. Given Councillor Cameron is attending to a private matter outside the chamber, I'm still happy to put the motion as a division. All those in favour, Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Mack, Councillor Con, Councillor King, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Thurley and Councillor Vandervan. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, we are up to the officers' reports for noting, which is the 2018-19 Works Program status update. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that council receive and note the report on the final status of the 2019-20 Works Program.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley. Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Stutchbury, did you wish to open debate?
No, I'll take the questions first. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor King, you have a question?
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. Two questions. On page 110, you've got a table of projects that were added during the 2018-19, and on the last dot point it says the installation of various traffic facilities across the city. Could the relevant member of staff just enlighten us on what that is?
Mr Lawson?
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. So the various traffic facility installations are those that are generally passed through the local traffic committee. So they can be minor in nature from, I can't think of any off the top of my head, so I can take that on notice, but certainly any of those that come back through council around minor adjustments to traffic flow and so forth.
Councillor King?
I'll wait for the correspondence on that. On page 111, the Enamoga sewer augmentation, the reason for the delay is project delay due to resource availability and extended tender and award process. Critical infrastructure to enable Nexus development. And given that we've just let the sewer tender, I think last meeting, how does this impact upon the previous, the other Enamoga sewer Nexus tender?
Mr Lawson?
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question again. That is the same project. So essentially the project was to be undertaken over 2 financial years, and due to the delay in essentially awarding that contract, there was a requirement to carry forward the funding out of the 18-19 financial year into the current financial year.
Councillor King?
So am I getting this right? So that one, the carry forward of $980,000 is actually contained in the $5 million contract we've awarded to Longford's Civil.
Mr Lawson?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Mr Lawson. Councillor Cameron has returned to the chamber. Councillor Stutchbury, there is no further discussion or debate. Do you wish to close debate on that item?
Happy to open and close the debate, Mr Mayor.
Good work. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. We have Events Economic Impact Report 2018-19. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council receive and note the Events Economic Impact Report 2018-19.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that?
Just to note that it appears to have been quite a successful year, a smaller number of events, but good visitation again.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. We have no delegates' reports for noting. Councillor Thurley, notice of urgent business.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd simply like Council to note the award in the Queen's Birthday Honours List of a member of the Order of Australia to Eliza Alt-Connell. She was made a member of the Order of Australia in the Queen's Birthday Honours List for significant service to community health and as a Paralympic athlete. Her contributions to the community are as a Director of Meningococcal Australia, and she also contributes to Lifeline. I think it's worthy of noting publicly that contribution. Both her and her family make a significant contribution to this community, and the award of a member of the Order of Australia is well deserved.
Seconded. Well done, Councillor Thurley. Okay, we now are moving into confidential. If I could have a mover into confidential, thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll move that. So move, Mr Mayor.
Could you read the recommendation, please?
I move the Council move into confidential to discuss items 17, CM 17.1, CEO Annual Performance Review 2018 and 19, and CM 17.2, CEO Employment Contract, as these are confidential items exclusive of press or public, on the grounds that the matters and information are the following: A, personnel matters concerning particular individuals other than councillors, Local Government Act 1993, number Section 10A2A.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Seconder is Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Happy to second that.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the chamber that would have any let the minutes reflect that we're back into open council at 8:22. I'll now read the motion from the confidential session. 17.1, the CEO's Annual Performance Review 2018-19, moved by Councillor Doxey, seconded by Councillor Thurley, that Council A endorse the results of the CEO's 2018-19 Performance Review. B, consider the remuneration package of the CEO. C, make no adjustment to the CEO's current remuneration package. The motion was carried, and Councillor Vandervan wanted his vote against recorded, which is recorded on the screen. In relation to 17.2, the CEO employment contract, the motion that the council offer the CEO an extension of his contract of 18 months on the same terms as his current contract. Moved by Councillor Cameron and seconded by Councillor Stutchbury. The motion was carried, and councillors wanted their vote recorded against were Councillor Vandervan, Councillor Thurley, Councillor Glacken and Councillor Doxey. That is the outcomes of the two motions, and council is now finished at 8:24. Thank you.